Gagan, and you're listening to the Voice of Insurance podcast, produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling an enterprise view of exposure. Today's guest is Richard Milner, CEO of Chaucer Group. Chaucer is a global specialty insurance and reinsurance institution with a great pedigree and significant scale, both inside and outside the Lloyd's market. Richard is coming up for 2 years in post as CEO and is beginning to make his mark on the business's long-term strategy. Richard has had the sort of underwriting career that makes him a very relatable guest. He worked his way up from photocopying slips at a Lloyd's box to travelling the insurance world. Now he's in senior management, he's easy to talk to because he's still unambiguously an underwriter to his core. As a result, this interview is really down to earth and practical in focus. In it, Richard lays out his 5-year plan for Chaucer, and we dissect the issues of the day in great detail and variety, ranging from how rates and business flows are holding up in a more competitive market, to an assessment of AI as a new emerging peril and potential new line of business. Richard is great company, and I can highly recommend a listen. Enjoy the podcast. Richard, welcome to the Voice of Insurance.
Mark, lovely to be here and lovely to meet you.
For anybody who's listening who doesn't know who you are, Richard, I find that hard to believe, but for those people, why don't you introduce yourself and run us through your career to date? We'll do the classic insurance story of how did he get into insurance?
Okay, so I might skip the how, but maybe later we'll touch on that. But so Richard Milner, I'm the CEO of the Chaucer Group. I started my career in the sort of mid-1990s with a Lloyd syndicate, DP Mann. Some people may remember DP Mann, David Mann. Great start to my career.
Is that Faraday these days?
It is now Faraday.
Good.
So turned to Faraday, I think in about 2001, 2002. Started off as a sort of underwriting assistant type photocopier sort of role, as you tended to back in that era. Progressed my way slowly up the underwriting ranks. And then I guess the first sort of break or major change in my career is in the early 2000s when I was offered a role over in Bermuda for a reinsurance company. Late 20s, early 30s, whatever age I was, thought that was a great opportunity. Bermuda then wasn't quite as established or famous as it is now, but
that was a good opportunity.
It was definitely a great opportunity. And that in many ways changed my sort of outlook on my life, quite frankly. So I went over to Bermuda in the early 2000s, lived in Bermuda for about 10 years, again, various underwriting roles. Most of that period was with Axis Capital on the Axis Re side. Then in the early 2010-11 periods, Axis asked if I would go over to Singapore to run their office there for the reinsurance, Axis Re's operation in Asia. So I moved over to Singapore, lived there for 3-4 years, and then slowly worked my way back to London, still with Axis, trying to figure out what Axis Re should do in London. Novi came along, I'm sure you can remember some of those, integration and things like that. So Axis Re back in London by now, this is sort of 16, 17, left Axis. A year or two later, went to a syndicate called Vibe for a year, which was an incredible sort of
that had
venture.
Been a sort of run-off manager, but there was a live venture for briefly.
There was a live venture, and the live venture was successful, but then came into a few problems. So an individual who I know was asked to put together a team to come in and have a look at Vibe and see what the future would be. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but a great experience in thinking about business and what opportunities out there. That came to an end, moved to Aspen. Aspen was going through the change of that business under Mark Cloutier. I was the UK CEO there, which was a different role to anything I'd done before. I'd always been on the sort of underwriting or underwriting leadership side. So that was the first big regulated CEO type role. Did that until I got the phone call from Chaucer in late 2023 and accepted the job. And here I am now.
We're bang up to date. You've been in post for plenty of time now. So tell us all about your plans for Chaucer. Let's start with how you want Chaucer to be perceived out of the market. You know, we're on 52 Lime Street here, out on Lime Street. Those brokers, when we mention Chaucer to those brokers, what do we want them to think of first?
So I think the primary way we like to be perceived is we are an underwriting business. We have a long history. We're over 100 years old. We've been in the Lloyd's market for all of that period. So we're a very strong underwriting business with great teams, great products. And we're backed by an exceptionally strong claims team and an internal infrastructure that allows us to write a successful portfolio of risk. I think the really interesting thing with Chaucer is that's not all we are. We're often known through our Lloyd syndicate, which is a sort of top 10 size scale syndicate, but we're also a bigger business than that. We have an operation in Dublin, Chaucer Insurance Company, that's our other platform. And on that, we now wrote close to $1 billion of income. from various offices around the world. So I think the perception, a good size, successful, long history, good brand Lloyd syndicate, but also a growing and evolving business with operations elsewhere.
To have that Lloyd's and non-Lloyd's balance, yeah, and Chaucer's had that non-Lloyd's for many years, because this is a long time ago, we're actually in UK Motor. But
that's long before my time, but yeah.
Long since exited, but certainly there's always been that non-Lloyd's element. How do you think that is going to balance over time as the business develops? Do you think one will grow faster than the other?
Look, I think we're very fortunate, as you say, to have a very strong Lloyd's business, but we also have a platform and ability to offer our clients and our brokers paper from another jurisdiction, from other locations. We don't think of it in that way. We don't think how big is the syndicate going to be, how big is Dublin going to be. We're more around where's the best place for us to underwrite risk, for our clients to put their risk with us, for the brokers, distribution, how they access those different platforms. So it's not we're going to do more in Lloyd's or more in Dublin. It's much more what's the best solution for our clients and our brokers. And that's the way we think about it rather than scale in either place. Kind of agnostic.
It'll take care of itself and you'll look at it once in a while and see, well, that's grown, but then that's logical because that's where the opportunity was. Yeah. So that's just the way it ended up that way.
Correct, yeah.
So you're not doing it by design. I was reading somewhere that you'd got 5-year plans.
We do, yes. And actually, I think that's really interesting and a differentiator for Chaucer. The way we operate is based on these 5-year cycles. The first cycle was 2019 to 2025. So we've just redone our 5-year plan, 2026 to 2030. And why I call that a differentiator is it's allowed Chaucer, it's allowed myself and the leadership team to really sit down and think about what do we want Chaucer to look like by 2030. And I think that's pretty unique. I've worked in a few businesses now and annual planning is always a big thing. And we put a lot of time and effort into annual planning. And sometimes you do 2-3-year plans, but really to think, set a strategy about what do you want Chaucer to be, where do you want it to get to over that period is a really interesting.
It's not normal, which is why I was remarking on it.
But also something, by the way, that was a little bit scary. So I turned up at Chaucer and they're like, well, you've got to devise the new 5-year plan. I'm like, well, I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do next year, let alone 5 years. But it was a fairly new leadership team here, allowed us to spend a lot of time off-site to build a plan that we're all behind and we're all thinking.
I suppose it makes you think about the bigger picture.
Absolutely. What do you want Chaucer, or what do we want Chaucer to be by 2030? It's a pretty difficult question to ask because there's all sorts that's going to happen on the way to 2030, but it does say, okay, we should be thinking about these areas at a much higher level than how much premium we're going to write in 2027, et cetera, et cetera.
So tell me all about it.
Have to be a little careful here because we haven't announced or released.
You can admit all the trade secrets, but to give that broad brush, sort of where are you good and think we should do more of that and maybe we should do slightly less of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the high level 2030 Chaucer is a more influential, a more relevant, a stronger business, quite frankly. And how are we going to do that? We are going to concentrate on what we do well. You just mentioned it. So we've identified our sort of core portfolios, core products. It's not doubling down on them. It's not a number, but really putting some strength and some emphasis around where we have true expertise, where we are a leader. There's a whole debate in London, around the globe, who is a leader, who is not. So we've really clearly identified where we think and where we've got some clients and brokers as well in the mix. Where do we actually add value?
It's a good exercise because, well, in fact, that report that was out by the LMA last week identified the difference between perception and reality.
Yeah.
And of course, every CEO that I interview, or certainly if it was 10 years ago, they'd have all said, well, we lead everything, pretty much.
But you can't, right?
That's not possible for all those statements to be simultaneously true.
I completely agree. So you really have to be pretty focused, pretty disciplined around that decision. What are we actually good at? So we've identified the areas we are. As I say, we'll talk about that a bit more over the next months as we start to release some of this. And that's a huge focus. Let's do what we're good at as well as we can to the best of our abilities, and that will allow growth in those areas. The other key part of what we're thinking about are the other areas that we have, so the global footprint, but we haven't really put a huge amount of effort into building infrastructure and people. So we have a lot of focus around becoming a more global company. London's our headquarters. It's always going to be. Our Lloyd syndicate is always going to be the core of our business. But we do have this network of offices and let's put some impetus into them and access distribution and sell different products in different locations. So another area that we're looking to improve. The next piece, which is as important, is our operational infrastructure. I mean, people don't like to talk about this because it's not the most glamorous, but you have to be efficient. You have to be, a business that allows our underwriters, our employees to have time. It has to be efficient. As I say, you have to be able to transact business in a way that's constantly changing, constantly evolving. And I think Chaucer, like many of our peers, have been a little slow in taking advantage of some of the sort of capabilities out there. So we've got the underwriting, the sales side, the growth side, but also the infrastructure is a huge part of our next 5 years, making sure we have the right infrastructure, not only for now, but for whatever is ahead of us. And that's a difficult thing, right? Because if we're putting in new systems and processes, are they going to be the right ones in 3-5 years' time? So a lot of work trying to get that right. And the key bit behind it all is people. So talent development, investing in our people. I know everyone would say that, but it's a huge part of what we have here at Chaucer. The culture of the business is as good as it's the best one I've ever worked in. And I'm not just saying that because of my position. I truly believe that. So again, in a growing and evolving business, making sure that doesn't change is crucial. And we think we do that by investing in our people and continuing training, development, and all those areas.
Talking about people, been reading interesting articles in the insurance press about a bit of a slowdown in hiring. Well, in fact, we're seeing it nationally, internationally, increase in youth unemployment. And a lot of this has been put down to AI and things like that. I wonder what your take on that is. Because in the same newspaper, I can see another story almost the same day saying people are absolutely fighting hand over fist and a lot of wage inflation for employees who, once they've got those tradable skills, once they've got the 3, 4, 5, 6 year experience, they're sort of doubling their money, which again, probably not very good for the expense ratio in the long term.
No.
But we've seen these two countervailing things happening. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, look, and that's certainly, as you've seen in the press, and if you read about it, that is happening in London, in the UK, and in other locations. The Chaucer view on this is a little bit different because we are investing in it. So we are growing our apprenticeship program, we're growing our graduate program. So we are putting time and effort into making sure as we develop over the next period that we have the right people. And let's be honest, we're all of a certain age and there's a different demographic coming in the business and they can bring in new ideas when we're thinking about our operational efficiency, for example. I can sit around a table with some super intelligent people, but we don't know everything. So bringing in those different age groups, demographies, different areas to think about that, I think will help us differentiate.
Well, it's good to hear that you're bucking this aggregate trend.
But it's all about the people. That's something I always say. So
I don't think perhaps while everyone's working out what to do with AI, they should probably still hire those younger people and then we'll work out what to do with them later, because it'll take them a couple of years just to work out what insurance is anyway.
And it'll probably have changed by then anyway. So we just keep moving forward.
What about growth within that plan? Obviously, you're going to be reinvesting in the core and making sure that core is ever stronger, which is great. What about growth? Would it be adjacent to the core, that kind of thing? So if you're really strong in one class, and you might think, well, actually, it's sensible to look at another class that's particularly adjacent that the same customers might buy, for example. And also, I want to know where you're seeing the best opportunities. Where do you think the best opportunities, either by line or geography, are at the moment?
So I think we can talk in a bit, no doubt, about sort of adequacy and market conditions. But from a Chaucer perspective, there's still a significant amount of adequacy in a number of our products. None of us are going to kid ourselves. The market is getting more competitive. There are certain products where we are keeping a very close eye on sort of terms and conditions, rates, etc. But as we look at it today, the vast majority of what we do is still very adequate. And if it wasn't, we wouldn't be doing it. So we still see opportunity for growth in what we do.
So just with the core?
Just with the core. But then we will also be looking at geographies. So we would have a strong expertise, a strong practice in a product in London. Why aren't we developing and selling that product through Singapore or Miami or Dubai or whichever office it may be? We have done a little bit of that, but we are certainly speeding up that process. We've just moved an underwriter from London over to Singapore. We've just moved some cyber expertise over to Dubai, for example. And it takes time and it takes development of those markets as well. But I think if we have expertise here and it's one of our cores and our strengths, why don't we look to do that elsewhere?
I remember probably after Hurricane Sandy, as journalists, we're all scrambling around trying to find interesting stories. And there's so many stories because it's sort of New York and New Jersey. There's thousands of stories around. But I remember talking to an analyst off the record and he said, well, Mark, look, if you want to look for who's got the biggest loss, who's got the most offices near there?
That's good. Yeah.
Because people want to do business with people. So you need to have people in those places. If you want to do more business in Dubai, probably good to go to Dubai.
Yeah, that's a different model to what Chaucer's been. It's been, as I say, the very strong sort of Lloyd syndicate, and the Lloyd's model is, in a way, and it's not like
come to you. Yeah.
They'll come to you, right? And that's the sort of history. Now, that's not the case all the time now, because yes, business does come to you in Lloyd's, but there's also business being placed and broke locally. And I think when I look at myself and my career, the moving from London to other jurisdictions and operating there, you kind of see that firsthand. And I've never forgotten that. And it's a really interesting thing, that sort of, yes, London's brilliant and we see a lot of business, but actually if you do put the right people or hire the right people locally, that there's incredible opportunities.
Yeah, and to see business that would never have dreamt of coming here.
Now, the trick is you've got to make sure it's good business, right? So you've also got to balance it. You can't just put offices everywhere and just go for it and hope it all works out. So you have to maintain consistency, and that's the expertise piece.
And in your plan, are there any more office openings likely, or do you think you've got the big enough network already?
It's a good question, and one we're thinking about. We have, as far as I'm concerned, the right network at the moment. So stage one of plan is let's look at those locations. What can we do to improve them? What can we do to strengthen them? Many of them don't need improving, but there are some products and other areas that we can add. And then undoubtedly, for what we are a growing global-ish business, that's the good thing. We're going to look at other locations. There aren't that many that we miss with our network, but there's one or two that we're thinking about.
Would it be more likely to be client-led, or it's sometimes the way of opening your office to be sort of drawn in by a client saying, well, why haven't you got an office where I've got my office,
Yeah, that's one of the factors. I think also, to be honest, distribution and product. Again, if we think about our expertise and where we think we should be selling, we need distribution there to help sell that product. So the areas we will look at if we go down that route will be recognised major hubs. We're not going into truly new locations.
It's difficult to plan these kind of things, but inorganic growth, we've seemed to have kicked off. We've had the market start to soften, immediately fired the starting pistol on inorganic growth. Could that be part of your plan as well? Obviously, you are backed by plenty of resource, because it's sort of the world's your oyster, surely.
In a way, yes. So that is part of our plan, but we are not going out saying we are going to do M&A and overnight double in size or whatever it may be. That's pretty new to Chaucer. We've done one or two over the years. We have a business in Australia that we purchased. We also have one in Ipswich. So we have done it before. We just haven't been that strategic around it since those acquisitions. Again, plan number one is let's do what we do well, as well as we can. But quite frankly, if opportunities, whether they be geographical or product or a combination of those, come to us, then we will look at it.
So it's all about the right time.
Yeah.
And the right opportunity. Any investment bankers listening, to bring the opportunity, it sounds like.
I think they've already found out. And again, it's not strategy number one, but as I say, it's a growing global business. It's something we should always consider.
So the 5-year plan sounds like it's not the sort of plan that has a number at the end of it.
No, it has a number for internal consumption, but I very much didn't want it to have a gross written premium feel, because then everyone feels you either have to get there. The premium will come, hopefully, and we will grow. But that's tough. That's the hardest bit to predict, the market.
That's the byproduct, really, of doing the right
So
things.
you put the infrastructure, you put the network, you put the people in place, and you hope that will then develop the business going forward. And if that's in 27 or 29 or 31, I mean, obviously we're not here forever, but there's no urgency to be of a certain scale by a certain time.
Obviously, we know that the market's going to be a little bit more of a headwind than it has been. It's been a tailwind the last 5 years, and now it's going to be a little bit of a headwind. Markets ebb and flow. But in that more competitive market, what are you doing to the business? How do you go about preparing the underwriting fraternity?
Again, another huge positive for Chaucer is that we have a number of experienced experts.
People who've been through enough cycles.
So, but we're a decent sized business with a lot of people. So not everyone has been through, but really looking for that leadership that have been through cycles to manage their portfolios. I'm a bit of a believer, and some of my peers and friends, we argue about this a little bit, that the MI and the data and the information we have now around spotting trends in rate and margin and profitability are better than I've seen. Not perfect, but better than I've seen. So I am pushing, certainly within Chaucer, to keep a very close eye on trends, very close eye on where the margin and the profitability of business. And if we don't see the appropriate profitability, let's not underwrite it. So I think you've got to underwriting discipline. Everyone talks about it, stress that. But to me, that's the MI, the data, the information backing it up. And then hope, and we have, that your underwriting leaders have the experience and the ability to manage their way through the cycle.
You've got to see those trends. You've got to act reasonably early, because you can't turn on sixpence.
And our industry has a history of seeing the trends, but 6 months, a year, who knows the number, but a little bit too late. So you've got to be on top of it. Again, it's systems, it's infrastructure to enable you to do that. It's not easy.
And with better systems, better information, over time, there is less and less reason not to be able to see what is in front of you.
Without a doubt, yeah. I agree completely.
certainly 30 years ago, it was much harder to spot the trend. You couldn't spot it, and so even 5 years after it had happened, we were still working it out.
So, we're putting a huge amount of effort and time and resource into that.
What about the way that demand is holding up? We're in an excess and surplus market, but operating in a global sense as an excess and surplus market for the whole world. How are submissions holding up? How's that submission flow?
Still flowing, still holding up.
Not ebbing the other way.
Not ebbing the other way as far as Chaucer is seeing at this stage. Now, there is conversation around that. What is that going to look like given the growth in recent years of the E&S market and business coming into London, which has been superb? It's a difficult one to predict the future, but if you look at some of the reasons or the factors behind that, you have stuff like climate change, regulation, some of those, not just rate and capital and ability to access balance sheets. There are other factors. Many of those factors haven't changed, so who knows what the future holds. But a lot of what's brought that business to London is still in place. So we expect it certainly for the near future to continue. But we'll, again, keep a close eye on it.
Yes, for example, everyone's been talking about these huge data centers. I did a whole podcast on it, kind of documentary on it. It was really interesting. I didn't know much about it before I started, but it seems like the sort of thing's perfect for London because, one, it's massive capacity, but it's also quite complicated. There's contamination and pollution exposures and obviously big cat exposure and some quite complicated stuff, and then renewable energy probably thrown in as well. So suddenly it becomes loads more complex than it's not just a shopping mall.
I completely agree. And again, the history and the strength of London is that innovative underwriting, the ability to work your way through different types of risks, different types of coverages and find a solution. I think this is a huge opportunity for the London market. And certainly we think at Chaucer, it's a huge opportunity for us to access some of those newer products. I mean, we do quite a lot on the AI space with a partnership with a very strong company. That's fascinating. We're lucky to have some experts in our innovation team, and it's a huge world of opportunity, quite frankly.
Oh, well, let's talk about that, because when I was doing my research, this jumped out at me, a recent announcement of yours of AI liability coverages.
Yeah.
Do you think this is going to become a standalone, or anyway, this is a new phenomenon, so you can be a first mover?
So we're pretty proud that we are already a relative first mover. You're never quite ever the first mover, but we're pretty quick in the game, and we have a wonderful relationship with a company called Milner, which is pioneering some of the products in this space. I think it ultimately does become a standalone.
It's obviously sometimes things become a standalone because either the regulators or, so the ultimate regulators being the really big reinsurers might say, this is an exclusion, this is going to be a standard treaty exclusion, therefore it must stand alone. Is it going to become because of that?
It's not really our view at the moment. I mean, if it does, then even better. But
because it just becomes a fact of life, doesn't it? If we're all using it, then it's just life and it's just liability.
Well, it's liability, but it's a different type of liability. Right? so that's the whole, it will follow traditional GL, DNO and all those sort of areas, but it's a different space. So I think understanding that and having expertise in that is going to be a bit of a game changer for a handful of carriers. And as I say, Chaucer are heavily involved in it at the moment. We don't have all the answers. We don't know the future, but to be involved in it, I think is hugely exciting. And I think that's also exciting for London, and London should be leading some of that business.
Yes, we know how to do these things. More technically, this sort of tech E&O effectively, or is it in some way ensuring the efficacy of the AI itself? That's the thing that becomes difficult to ensure, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the problem with it, because it's a little bit different. It doesn't fit into any of the sort of historical or existing products.
And if there was an error and an omission inbuilt into this agent and it starts infecting the whole way the company does business, then that's a big problem because it's very difficult to extract.
Absolutely. And what I'm told, I think we all know this, it continues to learn and continues to develop. So when you're insuring it at stage one in 6 months, it may have evolved, but there's still risk there. There's still liability there. So
we assume that AI is clever, of course, but if it's really idiotic and then keeps it gets worse and worse and worse, it keeps compounding its errors.
So it's an incredible area to sort of try and get your head around.
But I suppose if you get in early, you can be there when it's small and manageable.
And it's Chaucer involved, but it's really the business that we partner with has the real expertise. So that I like this about Chaucer. I think we've been brave enough to get involved in it, but also realistic enough to know we don't have the full expertise in that, but we have underwriting expertise, we have product and coverage expertise that we can help them build products.
And general insurance principles of what's insurable and how to do things properly and where the moral hazard might be and all the other things that they probably haven't thought about.
Absolutely, yeah.
On that subject, one of the big trends of the last 10 years has been that MGAs, or delegated underwriting in all its forms, has taken a bigger share of the insurance value chain. And obviously, you've been around for 100 years. I'm sure for all of those 100 years, Chaucer had some kind of delegated underwriting authority. And, Lloyd's, it's always been a really important percentage of Lloyd's GWP anyway. But it's really taken off. So again, this is you entrusting your knowledge to another underwriter or someone who's a real expert in a niche field, for example. So you're delegating your underwriting, but you're bringing your own capacity and your own knowledge as well. What do you think about that boom that's happened? Particularly, we've seen massive growth. On the podcast, I've had people who in year one were underwriting a couple of 100 million, and I get them back 3 years later, they're doing 3.5 billion. It's been astounding for me to meet these people, incredibly entrepreneurial, really successful, really interesting. They always would say that this is a permanent change in the way things are going about, partly driven by technology, because now we can isolate the skill of an underwriter. Before, the underwriter had to be attached to a balance sheet. And these days, we can now create a virtual insurance company and have all the attributes of an insurance company apart from the capital. And therefore, obviously, you have to be a good underwriter still, otherwise it won't be sustainable. But do you think this is a permanent change?
Yes, I do. The MGA model is absolutely here to stay. And quite frankly, we're okay with that. And we are a big supporter of a number of MGAs, and delegated underwriting is a large part of what we do. But we do that based on the expertise and the skill set of those businesses.
And then your ability to measure that skill.
And our ability to measure it. So again, it comes data, and information is a huge part of this. But I think where you have an MGA or a delegated underwriting facility where there's clear access to distribution, underwriting expertise, an efficient model, then of course that's going to stay, because it's attractive for a business like Chaucer that has strong teams, but also we're not unlimited resources for people and some of these areas. So let's support the strong players in that space. And yeah, it's here to stay. I think it's going to be really interesting over the next few years as the market, it's not going to be so easy for us. It's not going to be so easy for others. But again, experience has sort of shown me or taught me that the good underwriting businesses, the good underwriting franchises will continue and prosper. And there will be MGAs in that, absolutely.
Some might not work out, and that's just the way it goes. You've made a start on automatic algorithmic underwriting. What's the experience been so far?
So yes, we have. I would say we've made a relatively slow start compared to some of our peers, but
there's no need to be in a rush.
No, that was a strategic decision that was taken that was before my time, but I thankfully support. I think it's an area that, as Chaucer thinks, over the next 5 years, we are also putting a lot of time and effort into trying to work out the best way for us to access that area of the market. There is no doubt it is here to stay. In what exact form, I'm not totally sure yet, but in some form. And quite frankly, again, it's about distribution, it's about efficiency. As a holder of capital, having access to distribution and product through a more efficient mechanism, why wouldn't we be interested in that, right?
It's all underwriting.
It's all underwriting. You need the control. So we're active in that space, not as active as some others, but we are certainly looking at what options and opportunities we have going forward.
If it's something's giving you instant, profitable, massively diversified opportunity, I suppose you should look at it.
We underwrite not many of the sort of super large ones, but a number of facilities in various products. So we're kind of already there. We do some other stuff around algorithmic underwriting. So it's a fascinating area. I think it's not going to change everything, but it is certainly a part of the market, like the MGA space will be, that's here to stay. And let's learn about it, figure out the best way for Chaucer to access it, and we'll sort of take it from there.
I suppose the market will just work out what is an optimal amount, because I suppose no broker or client necessarily wants everything to be automatic, because that doesn't make any sense, because you still need a leader who really
you still need a leader. You still need people. As much as the world change involves relationships, contacts, people is still incredibly important in this business, and long may that continue.
Yeah, an algorithm can't pay an ex gratia claim.
No, there's always a space for that sort of, I guess, intellectual capital and knowledge of the business to enable carriers to make better decisions.
I think I've come to the end of my questions, actually, Rich. It seems we haven't been talking long enough. I don't know what's wrong. But I don't think anything is wrong. It just shows that you're very on top of your brief.
Very kind of you to say. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. And then we'll have to check in, hopefully before your 5-year plan is finished. And obviously, these 5-year plans, you get to iterate on them, don't you? You do revisit them. It's not set in stone, is it?
No, it's not. And really, because again, it's not the numbers are not the sort of key thing. It's really the strategic vision. That's getting very corporate, but the vision of where Chaucer want to be, that's the key bit, rather than premium year.
And that shouldn't change very often.
5 years, things are going to come along and test us. But no, it's good. As I say, it was an excellent journey for Chaucer as a relatively new leadership team to come in and set a vision for where we want to get to. And we're all looking forward to building and growing this wonderful company.
Thanks very much, Richard.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this programme. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry.
The Voice of Insurance is produced in association with Advantage Go. Release your underwriters to underwrite with Advantage Go's underwriting platform.
Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.